disrespected, humiliated, and punched. Darius turned the tables in a way no one saw coming. Darius couldn't contain his excitement. Today was the day he had dreamed about for years, the day he would finally buy his first brand new car. This wasn't just any purchase. It was a testament to his hard work and determination. Growing up in a small apartment in Fort Smith, Arkansas, life had never been easy. His mom had done everything she could to provide for him and his younger sister, working long hours at a diner just to keep food on the table. Darius had learned early on that nothing in life came without effort. For the past 5 years, he had worked tirelessly at the local factory, often picking up extra shifts and working weekends. He skipped vacations, ignored the temptation of expensive gadgets, and funneled every spare dollar into his savings. All of it was for this moment, a chance to walk into a dealership, point to the car he wanted, and drive away in something brand new. That morning, he stood in front of his mirror, carefully adjusting the tie he rarely wore. He wanted to look sharp, professional, like someone who belonged in a dealership showroom ready to make a serious purchase. His reflection smiled back at him, and for a brief moment, he allowed himself to feel proud of how far he'd come. The car he wanted wasn't flashy or ostentatious. It was a practical silver sedan with great reviews and solid reliability. To Darius, it represented more than transportation. It was independence, a symbol of how he'd risen above the challenges of his upbringing. He imagined pulling into his mom's driveway in it, surprising her with the news. She'd probably cry, and his little sister would beg for a ride. The drive to the dealership was filled with anticipation. Darius's old hatchback, which had seen better days, sputtered and groaned as he maneuvered it through town. He had to roll the windows down just to keep cool because the air conditioning had stopped working months ago. He chuckled to himself, thinking about how he wouldn't have to deal with that anymore. As he pulled into the dealership's lot, the sun gleamed off rows of polished cars, each one a promise of something better. Darius parked near the entrance, glancing around to take it all in. He had spent countless hours researching online, reading reviews, and comparing prices. He was ready. This wasn't going to be one of those impulsive purchases. He knew exactly what he wanted and how much he was willing to pay. Walking into the showroom, Darius felt a sense of pride swell in his chest. The dealership's bright lights reflected off the shiny car hoods, and the smell of fresh leather filled the air. This was it. He spotted the silver sedan across the room, parked neatly under a spotlight, and felt his heartbeat quicken. As he approached the car, his mind filled with images of what it would feel like to drive it. Smooth rides on long roads, the quiet hum of the engine as he pulled into work, the look on his mom's face when she saw it for the first time. This was his moment. But even as Darius's heart soared with hope, he had no idea how quickly his dream would start to unravel. Darius's excitement carried him across the polished tile floor of the showroom. He couldn't help but let his eyes wander over the array of vehicles, each gleaming under the bright overhead lights. But his focus quickly settled on the car he had come for, the sleek silver sedan sitting proudly near the center of the room. It looked even better in person, and for a moment, he allowed himself to imagine driving it home. As he moved closer, a sharp voice pulled him out of his daydream. "Can I help you with something?" The words weren't exactly welcoming. Darius turned to see a man approaching, the dealership manager. Judging by his expensive-looking suit and the authoritative way he carried himself, he was broad-shouldered, with graying hair slicked back in a style that seemed more concerned with appearances than comfort. His expression, however, wasn't friendly. It was skeptical, as if Darius's very presence required justification. "Yes," Darius replied with a polite smile. "I'm here to look at the silver sedan over there. I've done my research, and I'm ready to buy today." He kept his tone calm and confident, eager to show he was serious about this purchase. The manager's eyes flicked over him, taking in his modest attire, a simple button-up shirt and slacks that had seen plenty of wear. He didn't return the smile. Instead, he raised an eyebrow and crossed his arms. "That one's pretty expensive," he said, his tone cool. "Maybe you'd be interested in something a little more within your range." Darius felt a small pang of annoyance, but kept his composure. "I appreciate the suggestion, but I've already decided." I'm prepared to move forward with this car. The manager didn't budge. Instead, he let out a dismissive chuckle and nodded toward a section of older models near the entrance. We've got some pre-owned vehicles over there that might be a better fit. A lot of people start there when they're buying their first car. Darius's stomach tightened, but he refused to let the comment throw him off. Thank you, but I've already saved up for this one. I even have a pre-approval letter from my bank. He reached into his pocket to pull it out, ready to prove that he wasn't just window shopping. But the manager didn't even glance at the letter. Look, he said, his tone hardening. You can't just walk in here and expect to drive off in one of our top models without knowing what you're getting into. Do you even know what the monthly payments are? The words hit Darius like a slap, not because he didn't know he had done his homework, but because of the condescension dripping from the manager's tone. He felt his chest tighten, a mix of anger and embarrassment bubbling up. He glanced around, noticing the sideways glances of a few employees nearby. Still, he kept his voice steady. I've done all the math. I know exactly what I'm getting into, and I'm ready to move forward. All I need is for someone to assist me with the process. The manager narrowed his eyes, his posture stiffening. You're wasting my time, he said bluntly. I've seen this before. People come in here pretending they're ready to buy, but when it's time to talk numbers, they back out. I'm not here to play games. Darius's jaw tightened. He had spent years saving for this moment, meticulously planning every detail, only to be treated like a liar and a nuisance. I'm not pretending, he said firmly. I'm here to buy the car. That's it. But the manager wasn't listening. He stepped closer, his voice growing louder, enough to catch the attention of nearby customers. Listen, kid, he said, his words cutting. You don't belong here. And I don't have time to babysit someone who doesn't understand how this works. Darius's hands clenched at his sides, his pride and patience being tested like never before. But little did the manager know, his actions were about to escalate this encounter into something that neither of them would soon forget. The room seemed to grow quieter as tension thickened the air. Darius stood his ground, his voice firm but calm. I don't know what your problem is, but I'm here as a paying customer. If you can't handle that, maybe I should talk to someone else? The manager's face twisted with irritation, his posture stiffening as he stepped even closer. Someone else? I'm the manager here, he barked. You don't get to waltz in here and call the shots. People like you come in all the time, wasting my time, making big claims, and walking out when it's time to actually pay. The words, people like you, hung in the air like a thunderclap. Darius felt the weight of every assumption behind them, every layer of disrespect wrapped in those 4 words. His chest tightened, but he refused to let the man's blatant hostility shake him. People like me? Darius repeated, his voice low but laced with resolve. I've worked hard for this. I've saved every penny to make this happen. And you're standing here treating me like I don't belong, like I'm not worth your time. That's not how this works. By now, the confrontation had drawn a crowd. A few customers hovered near the edges of the room, some pretending to browse while sneaking glances at the escalating situation. A couple of employees exchanged uneasy looks, but made no move to intervene. The manager sneered, waving a dismissive hand. You don't belong here. Period. I'm telling you to leave before you embarrass yourself any further. Darius's heart pounded in his chest, but he held his head high. I'm not leaving, he said firmly. I have every right to be here, just like anyone else. That was the breaking point. The manager's patience snapped. Without warning, he lunged forward, shoving Darius hard in the chest. The force sent Darius stumbling back a few steps, his heel catching on the edge of a display stand. He barely managed to steady himself before falling. Gasps rippled through the room, but no one moved to stop what was happening. Darius straightened, his hands trembling, not from fear, but from anger. You just put your hands on me, he said, his voice shaking with barely contained fury. You really think you can treat people this way and get away with it? The manager wasn't done, his face twisted with rage. He threw a punch that landed squarely on Darius's shoulder, sending him reeling. The sound of the impact echoed through the showroom, freezing everyone in place. For a moment, Darius stood still, his breath coming in short bursts as he processed what had just happened. He touched his shoulder, feeling the dull ache where the punch had landed. But the pain was nothing compared to the humiliation coursing through him. The manager stood there, arms crossed and chest puffed out, as if daring Darius to retaliate. "Get out," he snarled. "I don't want to see your face here again." Darius looked around, meeting the eyes of the onlookers. Some looked away, uncomfortable, while others watched with a mix of shock and hesitation, unsure whether to step in. But Darius wasn't about to let himself be dragged down to the manager's level. He took a deep breath, his mind racing. Every fiber of his being wanted to fight back, to show this man he wasn't someone to be pushed around. But he knew that wouldn't solve anything. Instead, he turned and began walking toward the door, his head held high despite the humiliation. He could feel the sting of the manager's actions, not just on his shoulder, but deep in his soul. As he stepped outside, the cool air hit his face, a sharp contrast to the heat of his anger. He paused for a moment, looking back at the dealership. "This isn't over," he murmured to himself. What the manager didn't realize was that his actions had just ignited a fire in Darius, a fire that would turn the tables in ways no one could have anticipated.